Just a year ago, we celebrated ARC's 25th years of existence. I want you to think back what Africa was like 25 years ago when it comes to economic policy decisions. Decisions were being guided by judgment, heuristics, ideology, and prescriptions largely drawn from outside the continent. And ARC came into existence to really change that. The change came about through what is known as this capacity building framework of ARC, which has actually endured over 25 years. So we are in the business of building capacity to advance research and training to inform economic policies in sub-Saharan Africa, but bringing rigor and evidence to policy making. Now, you can see that there are three pillars in that chart. The first pillar being research, which is a composite of thematic and collaborative research. And then we have collaborative training, and then we have policy outreach. The senior policy seminar has three purposes. One is we take collaborative research with rigor and evidence to communicate that to senior policymakers, ministers of finance, their deputies, governors of central banks, their deputies. Basically, you see in that senior policy seminar a dialogue between researchers and policymakers. And the second reason out of that is you are hoping that out of this dialogue you are creating an environment for informed policymaking. And then we actually rely on them to guide us back. We come back, we get actually informed by this policy, and then we go back to our research and training design. A huge arm, another arm called collaborative training, which has been remarkably successful. So the collaborative research model of ARC inspired collaborative training programs, collaborative masters in economics, collaborative masters in agricultural economics, collaborative PhD program, where you have a network of universities collaborate on joint curriculum development, joint monitoring and enforcement of standards, and also shared and joint offerings of electives. And the idea is to bring the curriculum towards best practices globally, and also at the same time, by the way, build capacity of institutions in the state's economics departments. It turns out that there is also a linkage between training and policy. And I'm going to give you a very simple illustration at a master's level. And I want you to look at this picture. This is an interesting picture. And this is something that I figured out after I got this job. This is what we see there is a dissemination workshop where master's students in agricultural economics have taken data from farmers and have developed their thesis, and now they are ready back, communicating back to farmers. So in the same room, you will see farmers, you will see policymakers, you will see extension workers, and financial institutions. You know, we're celebrating what is known as this growth renaissance. Growth renaissance in a continent that used to be known as hopeless. And the guys who actually called us hopeless came back and said, we're rising. Right? Now, we are in a privileged position of changing the lingua. The lingua is no longer growth. It's really how do you create inclusive and shared and productive employment. I'm going to mention Zambia. Zambia has been, where we are now, has been one of the most beneficiaries of ARC. So to do this groundwork for this biannual research workshop, myself and my team showed up at the University of Zambia. They were telling us that the master's program could have just vanished, without ARC. And then they said, amongst the 15 academic staff, 9 of them are actually members of the ARC alumni network. And then I go to the Governor Gondwe, and then he tells me, we have 6, this high quality, researchers now at various levels of policy making at the Central Bank of Zambia. And to get you to appreciate what I'm going to say, I know a lot of you who have been ARC network, you may be interested to know how this organization is actually governed. So I report to a board of some 70 members. There are two categories. There is a category of institutional directors. These are those who are representing institutions. So the World Bank has a seat, the government of UK, Sweden, Norway, Denmark, and so on. So it's institutions. So these are directors which are actually representing institutions. The second group has to do with at-large directors. And these are senior African policymakers and also senior scholars. Now, it turns out that the institutional directors are the ones who are representing guys who are giving us money. So basically, they are funding partners. There is also another exciting development. The first ever convening of African governors of central bank occurred in Zanzibar in August. There were 11 countries, founding members. They go together. The agenda was simple, was the future of ARC. What was interesting about that forum was that I went there with this elaborate presentation of the overview of ARC, with value proposition. The governor said, don't waste your time. We already know. So let's focus on the future. So I'm going to conclude. I said earlier, these have been exciting times for Africa, but also have been really exciting times for ARC. We are determined to contribute and engage in this ongoing conversation of inclusive growth, productive employment, and one of the reasons that we have our plenary today on youth employment is for that. So I'm going to end my remarks. Thank you for coming. And
I must mention, or hasten to mention, that we are honored as a nation to host the 40th plenary session of the African Economic Research Consortium's AERC Biennial Research Workshop. This event is a combination of months of planning. Its success will be a reflection of our shared resolve to contribute to policy on how to ease the burden of youth unemployment, not only in Zambia, but across the subcontinent. Therefore, I'm honored to welcome our international scholars and guests to Zambia. Welcome. I am delighted to mention that we have been working around the clock in the past few months to launch the 10th school to be known as the University of Zambia Graduate School of Business. This initiative is important in making a contribution to addressing the mismatches that exist between the skills of graduates, between the skills graduates take to the labor market and the skills employers are looking for. With the coming of the business school, I am confident that the competitiveness of our students will rise further, and I want to believe they'll enjoy the relief of additional skills to be gained that will align them to both public and private sector employment opportunities. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, the AERC means a lot to the University of Zambia. As a founding member, the University of Zambia has benefited from the support of the AERC in advancing the training of graduates from the University of Zambia Economics Department through the collaborative master's and doctoral economics programs. I draw your attention to the Zambia Labor Force Survey report of 2012, which estimated Zambia's unemployment rate at 7.9%, while youth unemployment was highest among the 20 to 24-year age group, where it was estimated at 16.3%. This situation must worry all of us, more so that Zambia's population is largely youthful, where 64.2% of the population is below 25 years.
the Executive Director of the African Economic Research Consortium, members of the diplomatic corps, international scholars, the Vice Chancellor of the University of Zambia, heads of academic and research institutions, the Executive Director of MEFMI, who is also former Governor of the Bank of Zambia, Dr. Kareb Fundanga, members of the research community, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, all protocols observed. It gives me great pleasure to be in your midst today and to preside over the official opening ceremony of this special event. It is the 40th plenary session of the biannual research workshop of the African Economic Research Consortium, AERC. It is my great pleasure to welcome each one of you to our beautiful country with the sincere hope that you will be present and productive. Ladies and gentlemen, the theme for the plenary session of the AERC Biannual Research Workshop, Youth Employment, Opportunities and Challenges, is relevant in Zambia and the rest of Africa. Africa has the fastest growing and most youthful population in the world, and the continent faces demographic challenges as its population of young people increases and access to secure jobs continues to be challenging. Over the years, AERC has amassed a wealth of knowledge through its research activities. In this regard, I commend AERC for developing time and resources to share this knowledge, particularly the policy research findings that with policymakers on a regular basis. I am aware that Zambia, as a country in general, has immensely benefited from the programs of AERC.
In Zambia, I think the Central Bank had tried to make funds more available by reducing the state reserve ratios, bringing down the policy rate, and so forth. And then this created a lot of money, and then there was a high demand for, plus other actions, okay? There was a high demand for foreign exchange, and the kwacha lost its value. And there was such a big outcry. Now, when the central bank took measures by increasing the borrowing rate, I haven't heard similar outcries. So sometimes most of these policymakers go with the wind. If you are going to make a lot of noise when the local currency loses value, they will focus on that. But clearly, when they see that you are not making noises when the cost of borrowing goes up, then they will just leave it like that. Perhaps that is the reason. I'm only speculating.
But I have to change. So you need to look at those applications and find out whether they are actually working and want to change up, or they've not been working for a long time and so on. So that's something that we have to look at. And that brings me to the issue of data, and my good friend from UNTAG has actually dealt with that. You cannot come up with any good policy and have impact if you don't know what is on the ground. And I think the discussion about even small-scale enterprises, how many of them are collapsing, how many of them are coming up. If countries have not been able to come up with industrial census, how will you be able to know that some firms are collapsing, these are the challenges they are facing, and so on, to be able to see whether jobs are being created? So for me, it is very, very important that we invest in data collection. And you may ask yourself, from before the early 80s, if you look at countries, they were actually collecting good data on employment. What has changed? And I always think that maybe I have to be very careful because Dr. Fox is close to me from the World Bank. But I think the Economic Recovery Program, Structural Adjustment Program, has done very well in Africa.
Firstly, I just want to state that whatever we do, we cannot run away from governments. That's why we keep on talking about government. So government, in a way, have no choice, but they have to be in the equation because they are the owners of the policies. We should not give up. I think it is our duty to let governments, in whatever sector it is, to realize that they are policymakers. And those policies are meant for us. And therefore, we have to continue doing our job to speak to government. So dialogue is a continuous process. And I would like just to end with something that was said: small is not always beautiful.